Welcome. We're going to get started. My name is James Wilson, for those of you who don't know me, and I am excited to kick off the festivities this afternoon. And I want to thank Mia Zhu, who has really done an amazing job organizing this conference and this award ceremony. Mia could not be here, she's teaching at this time, but I think it would be very important that we just give a round of applause to Mia. After my brief introductory remarks, Chris Harder will present the Booth Award to Michael R. Jackson, and this will be followed by a performance by Michael and a discussion with Chris and me and Michael all together. So sit back and enjoy. First of all, I cannot tell you how thrilled and honored I am to introduce this year's Booth Award winner. When I was a student here at the Graduate Center in the Theater and Performance program, the Booth Award ceremony was the Tonys, the Oscars, and the Emmys all rolled up into one for us starstruck graduate students. And even more important, it was our ceremony. For one day each year, we rolled out the red carpet in the green room, and that became our version of Sardi's, the Carlisle, and Tavern on the Green. Some of the recipients of the 1990s when I was a student were Joseph Papp and the New York Shakespeare Festival, Richard Foreman, Ellie Coven and Dixon Place, and Hal Prince. So to be standing in front of you today as the executive officer of the program is truly a strange and wonderful loop. To my mind, there is no one more deserving of the award than Michael R. Jackson. Jackson, or as he identifies online, the living Michael Jackson, has given theater folk what we have been craving forever: big, black, and queer-ass American shows. In 2022, Time magazine included him among the 100 most influential people, and his musical A Strange Loop, which premiered off-Broadway in 2019, took New York by storm. It received 11 Tony nominations, and it won the top prizes, in addition to the Pulitzer Prize and New York Drama Critics Circle Award. New York Times critic Ben Brantley called it a, quote, full-on laparoscopy of the heart, soul, and loins, as well as a gutsy, jubilantly anguished musical with infectious melodies. In 2023, he followed up with White Girl in Danger, which was described as a fever dream mashup of classic daytime and primetime soap operas, Lifetime movies, and red-hot melodrama. Zachary Stewart proclaimed it a, quote, must-see new musical from one of the sharpest voices in the theater today. Jackson wrote the book and lyrics for Teeth, for which Anna K. Jacobs collaborated on the book and provided the music. The show, based on the indie horror film, debuted in 2024 and is about a woman with vagina dentata. Adam Feldman summed up the premise by explaining, quote, her lady plumbing has a little something extra. A garbage disposal that cuts off the junk of any guy who tries to force his way in. As is evident from the above descriptions, the pleasures of going to a show by Michael R. Jackson are boundless. His musicals are uproariously funny, and they go places few writers dare to go. As a bonus, his songs are eminently tuneful, and they expertly combine pop, musical theater, blues, and other forms. At the same time, his shows are both timely in their unflinching excoriation of our social ills, and timeless in revealing the absurdism and trauma of being an outcast in an indifferent society. As a professor of queer theater, African American drama, and gender and sexuality studies, I have sometimes used his songs in my classes to succinctly convey ideas and theories more effectively than I could in my own tortured analysis. Last week, the new movie Blue Moon opened, and the film centers around Lorenz Hart, one of the foremost lyricists of the American musical. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I've been thinking a lot about Jackson within the pantheon of great songwriters, including Irving Berlin, Cole Porter, Bakken Harnick, Stephen Sondheim, Kander and Ebb, William Finn, and many others. Larry Hart was among the first, excuse me, Larry Hart was among the first to subvert the cheerful and saccharine sweet imagery of typical musical comedy song lyrics, often with biting wit and sarcasm. But he could also imbue his lyrics with poetic ruefulness. In the song This Funny World from the 1926 musical Betsy, for example, you have a sense of the depths of the character's inner turmoil. Hart's lyric contains the lines, "This funny world makes fun of the things that you strive for. This funny world can laugh at the dreams you're alive for. If you're beaten, conceal it. There's no pity for you. For the world cannot feel it. Just keep to yourself, weep to yourself." Similarly, Jackson has a unique gift to put into words emotions that seem to be completely inexpressible for mere mortals. And like Hart, Jackson laces his songs with wit and humor that give the lyrics an additional sting. For me, one of the simultaneously most heartbreaking and hilarious songs from a musical comes from A Strange Loop. In that show, the central character, Usher, describes his own version of this funny world, echoing Hart. He sings, "I don't have AIDS, and I don't care about marriage, and I will never be pushing a loud-ass baby around in a carriage. No, I'll just walk around with a scowl on my face like I'm Betty Friedan, because the second-wave feminist in me is at war with the dick-sucking black gay man." In his New York Times review of Blue Moon, Jesse Green commended the film for depicting the artistry, emotional labor, and personal pains the great American songwriters bring to a genre that is often dismissed as both overly commercial and deeply frivolous. For the first time in film, Green writes, we see where all that seemingly effortless art came from the endless brainwork and bullheadedness of craft, fighting to stay afloat on a sea of mediocrity. As a musical theater artist, Michael R. Jackson isn't just navigating the waters, he's guiding the ship. Thank you. And now I would like to bring to the lectern Chris Harder, who will do the honor of presenting the Booth Award to Michael R. Jackson on behalf of the students in the Theater and Performance program. Chris is a PhD candidate in theater and performance here at the Graduate Center. His research interests include histories of boylesque, male burlesque, and queer striptease in the United States, and the role of erotic performance in shaping sexual subcultures. In addition to his research, Chris is also a performer and MC in the neo-burlesque scene of New York City, and has been an invited guest performer at shows and festivals across the US, Europe, and New Zealand. Chris is a current board member of the Doctoral Theater Students Association and an adjunct lecturer in the theater and English departments at Hunter College and the Performing and Creative Arts Department at the College of Staten Island. Chris.
Good afternoon. Oh, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jim, so much. Again, a huge thank you to Michael R. Jackson for being here today, and also a big thank you to Mia and to the rest of the organizing committee of the Booth Awards ceremony and this fabulous conference. If you haven't seen yet, we are also selling books and baked goods, so do check that out. I bake gluten-free brownies myself. So a little bit about the Edwin Booth Award. The Edwin Booth Award was established in 1983 by the Doctoral Theater Students Association to honor an individual or organization that has had a significant impact in the theater and performance scene of New York City. Named after the 19th century actor who was famed for his intellect, the Edwin Booth Award seeks to unite the professional and the artistic communities here in New York. Award recipients are nominated and elected by members of the DTSA, who, as you have already observed, have been running this conference and also running off to teach their classes. Some previous recipients, in addition to those fabulous artists that Jim has mentioned, include Young Jean Lee, Taylor Mack, Elevator Repair Service, the Classical Theater of Harlem, and last year's honoree, Gelsey Bell and Thing New York. So, on behalf of the Doctoral Theater Students Association at the CUNY Graduate Center, it is with great honor, gratitude, and admiration for me to present this year's 2025 Edwin Booth Award to Michael R. Jackson.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I'll say something. It'll keep it brief. Thank you so much for this award. I really appreciate it. I wasn't expecting anything. To be honest with you, look, I've been feeling a little bit lately, a bit like yesterday's news, which is not like I don't live for the applause or anything like that. But I think like I just sort of have been feeling, speaking to what you were just saying about Loren's heart and the mediocrity and all that, I sort of been feeling a bit like a cog in something turning, if I may quote Joni Mitchell. And so it's like nice to be reminded there are people who care about art and that my contributions to it and what I'm trying to do. And so I really thank you all so much for the recognition. I'm going to now do two songs for you, if that's okay. One of them is from The Strange Loop, and the other one's from my show, White Girl in Danger. Just thought I would throw in for a little fun, and I'll give some context for that one when we get to it. Should I leave this here? This tune is from A Strange Loop. It's also the first song that was ever written for it, and it's the penultimate song in the show. It's called Memory Song. "5'4", high school gym, sneaking a cupcake. These are my memories, these are my memories. Shooting hoops off the rim, slow on the uptake. These are my memories, these are my memories. After gym, the locker room, my eyes photographing. Naked me measures in at 4.5 inches. These are my memories, these are my memories of one lone black gay boy I knew who chose to turn his back on the Lord. One lone black gay boy I knew who chose to turn his back on the Lord. Guilt and shame, Jesus' name, church every Sunday. These are my memories, these are my memories. Eat his body, drink his blood, communion buffet. These are my memories, sweet sour memories. After church we're driving home to Radio Crackle. Jazz music or Motown blues and skin is a shackle. For one lone black gay boy I knew who chose to turn his back on the Lord. One lone black gay boy I knew who chose to turn his back on the Lord. These are my memories, sweet sour memories. This is my history, this is my mystery. Mom is napping on the couch and Dad cuts the grass while I watch TV all day long, young and the restless. Like one lone black gay boy I knew who chose to turn his back on the Lord. One lone black gay boy I knew who chose to turn his back on the Lord. Dad is drunk and on the couch while Mom eats a pork chop. Daily bread mill, daily treadmill, won't ever stop. One lone black gay boy I knew who chose to turn his back on the Lord. One lone black gay boy I knew who chose to turn his back on the Lord. I am lying on the couch, I dream that I'm flying, flapping both my wings so hard to keep me from dying, with the crown of God-forsaken thorns on my head. Like all those black gay boys I knew who chose to go on back to the Lord. All those black gay boys I knew who chose to go on back to the Lord. All those black gay boys I knew who chose to go on back to the Lord. And one lone black gay boy I knew who chose to turn his back on the Lord. Instead, thank you. And this next one is from my show White Girl in Danger, which I'm just going to give you a little context for those of you who are not familiar with it. White Girl in Danger is a sort of meta musical, my favorite kind, that is set in the world of a soap opera. Not on a soap opera set, like a town called Allwhite. And in the town of Allwhite, there are these citizens who are known as Allwhites, who sort of have these white characters who have sort of crazy storylines that that just go as far as the eye can see. And then you have another group of citizens called the Black Round. And the Black Round sort of cycle through two modes of storytelling, slavery and police violence. And they just sort of do that over and over and over and over again. Until one of them, this plucky girl named Keisha, declares she's tired of the Black Round storyline that her life is, and she wants to be with the Allwhites. And so the sort of creator of the universe, the Allwhite writer, sort of the Oz-like figure, announces that one of the Allwhite girls has been killed by the Allwhite killer. And so now there's a spot for a new best friend to the Megan, Megan, and Megan, who are the three sort of main Allwhite girls in this town. And so Keisha becomes their best friend, but it's not enough for her, and so she begins scheming to sort of become a main protagonist in this story universe. But before she does that, her entree into that is that Megan, Megan, and Megan are getting ready for the All-White Battle of the Bands. And they have a band called Girl White. And Girl White is about to have band practice, and they're about to sing one of their signature tunes, which Keisha sort of like is lip-syncing along to as they sing. It's called Basic. I'm not like other guys you've known. That's why you're scared when we're alone. So let down your guard. Why make it sad when I'm just basic? I'm so basic. Let's be basic, you and me. Yeah. She's such a complicated girl, but without your toes will never curl. You'll come with me and I'll set you free, and we'll be basic. We'll be basic. Let's be basic. Can't you say? my dreams. I know it seems like I'm coming on so strong. Yeah, she won't blacken her pennies, but I can please you all night long, because I'm so basic. I'm so basic. Let's be basic. Can't you say?
Okay, so now we'll have some time for a discussion, which will go about 30 minutes, and then we'll leave about 15 minutes or so for audience questions and responses.
Well, first off, thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you.
And also, I just wanted to say a thank you to all those at HowlRound who are tuning in remotely and internationally to watch, so thanks for joining us. And also, a thank you to the Segal Theater Center. So thank you again to the Segal for hosting us today. Jim, do you want to start us off with a question?
Sure.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so Michael, I've heard you mention in previous interviews that as an adolescent, you identified as the, quote, black gay teenage storyline.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could just tell us what you mean by that and how that has affected your work and your own choices as an artist.
Yes, so I am from Detroit, Michigan. I grew up in a, thanks Detroit.
Detroit is in the house.
I come from like a lower middle class family, and you know, my parents sort of kept me pretty busy as a young person, so I didn't get into any trouble. So I was always involved in the arts and choir and dance class and writing classes, and you name it, I was doing it. And during that period as a teenager, this is sort of like the mid to late 90s, I was starting to come out as gay. And what I discovered was I was in this all-city black classical chorus. And in that black classical chorus was like a lot of like gay boys. Some of whom were closeted, some of whom were not. Most of them were closeted or not public about it. It was like a strange time because sort of in the world at large, people like Ellen were starting to be on the cover of magazines being like, yep, I'm gay. So like that was happening, but sort of still within my little world, you still sort of like were not out. But meanwhile, there's this kind of subculture that was in my high school and sort of sister high schools, rival high schools, where everybody was like dating and sleeping with each other. And it was like this strange episode of Melrose Place, of which I was kind of on the outside of watching, but while also a member of it. And so that's why I call it the black gay teenage storyline, because it was like every week, like a different couple was together. It was so crazy. And it was something that you wouldn't expect, given how a lot of us were raised in these churches and had pastor grandfathers and stuff, but meanwhile, like had a different boyfriend literally every other week.
I love that. It's always the pastor's kids, right?
Oh yeah, it was so many. So many. And then some of them later got married to women, so.
Yeah. So I think many people, especially many theater scholars, might be familiar with the fact that A Strange Loop went through about an 18-year development process.
To Broadway, yeah.
Yeah. I was just curious, can you share more about what else you were working on or doing in the city while that was still in development?
Yeah, so when I was working, all the years I was working on A Strange Loop, which was very off and on, it wasn't like a consistent thing. I worked every kind of job that I could imagine. I did a lot of temping, so I was in a lot of offices. I temped at an insurance company. I delivered cookies for the temp agency that I was working for. Like they once were like, hey, we need you to deliver these cookies to other offices that are from us. And I did that, and like it was a crazy day when I had to do that because you had to show up for these jobs like dressed in a suit. And so I had to hustle around the city in like 80-degree weather in like a suit delivering cookies to these office buildings. It was wild. And then I did some temp work in the Juilliard School and the admissions office during their admissions season. And then my most sort of consistent thing was I was ushering at the New Amsterdam Theatre, first for Lion King, then for Mary Poppins when Lion King moved to the Minskoff, and then a brief seasonal stint a couple years later at Aladdin. So I went all through the Disney pantheon. And so I was just, that's what I was doing in grad school, out of grad school, just hustling to make a dollar any way that I could while I was writing.
Yeah, and just a follow-up to that, while you were working on again, off again on A Strange Loop, were there certain like light bulb moments where you felt like that show was starting to take the shape that you imagined it would take?
Well, so the way that A Strange Loop came into being was very piece by piece by piece by piece. And so there were lots of different sort of markers for it to finally end up where it ended up. So like initially it was just a monologue, a thinly veiled personal monologue that I had started writing right after I graduated from undergrad at NYU, dramatic writing. And it was just this sort of, was just like that. It was just this sort of stream of consciousness text that was called Why I Can't Get Work. And it was about like a young black gay man just graduated from college who was like, what am I gonna do with my life and why is life so terrible? And I was not writing songs, I did not know how to write songs, I was not thinking about writing songs. It was just this monologue. And then I went to grad school at NYU again for musical theater writing. And there I was just studying book writing and lyric writing. And that gave me a good form to pour musical stuff into, because I did grow up playing piano and I was a musical person, but I didn't know how to put words and music together. So then at NYU, we had an assignment where a teacher said, if you're a lyricist who's never written music or a composer who's never written lyrics and you want to try it for the assignment, go for it. So then I decided to take what I'd learned about lyric writing over the year and see if I could put music to lyrics, and the song that came out of it was Memory Song. And then that went over really well in my class, and so then I was encouraged to continue writing my own music for, even though for the second year, I was gonna be paired with a composer for our thesis project. So I just kept writing songs that were just for me, personal songs for me. And so then a director who I had been working on something else had heard some of those songs, had read that monologue and thought, what if we tried to put them together into something? So then when we did that, that's when it turned into this one-man show that I performed in New York in 2006 called Fast Food Town, which was based off the name of a song that I had written. And so then from there, I was like, I performed it once, probably for 20 people, 2 people walked out in the middle of it. And I was like, I don't want to be in this, and it's not about me per se. And so we then went to do some development to sort of create a more discrete book for it. And then we did a reading of that, and then I did another reading of that. And then from there, I ended up partnering with my director, Stephen Brackett, because throughout all of that, I was still writing lots of songs, and some of which were in the show and some of which were not. And Stephen had directed some of those concerts. So then I was like, hey, I want to put all of this finally together to see what it all is. And so then we did a big reading at NYU of it, where Stephen suggested that we cast it with all black gay men at that time. And that was sort of the first marker of like, this is what A Strange Loop is. Then the second marker of it as that was about 3 years later at this organization called the Musical Theater Factory. Founding artistic director Shekina Nathak had invited me there to sort of develop it, and from there we did a big reading of the show with rewrites and stuff, and that's when it really sort of began. The version of the show that most people are familiar with really began at Musical Theater Factory. And then over the course of the next year, we got a couple other little bites to work on it. And then that's when Playwrights Horizons approached us about doing a reading for them. And then from there, a commercial producer optioned it. And then from there, we did another reading with more changes like later that year. And then we were at Playwrights like a year and a half after that.
You actually mentioned your studying at NYU. And I know that you worked with Bill Finn, and you actually received an award, the Bill Finn Award, just recently.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about your experiences with your teachers, particularly, I mean, as a big fan of William Finn, I'd love to hear about how he influenced your work.
Yeah, so I always tell people that I am the poster child for teachers, like teachers being really, really, really important to student development. And because pretty much for my entire life, I've had a teacher at every single stage pushing me along, telling me to go a little further, to keep doing what I was doing, and not being prescriptive about it, and like, but challenging, you know? So like that goes all the way back to when I was in middle school, and I had a language arts teacher, Mrs. Callahan, who saw that like I liked reading and that I liked writing poems and short stories, and she really sort of encouraged that. And then I went to high school, and then my whole high school year, from 9th to 12th grade, the language arts, or the English department head, Miss Thompson, who also was our creative writing teacher, I took creative writing for every semester of every year of high school. And she was getting involved with this program that just was starting the year I started high school, called Inside Out, which they just had their 30th year anniversary this past weekend, which I was there in Detroit for. And this organization brought writers and residents into the schools with us, and then they would work with us in our creative writing classes. And so I was working, both doing creative writing sort of as my everyday or every other day class, plus the writer and residents would come in, plus then one of those writers was this guy named Peter Marcus, who is a Michigan-based writer who was doing private writing workshops, who I then got my parents to pay for me to study with him in downtown Detroit. So then he was the one who was really like, you need to stop mimicking everyone and like try to find your own voice and be more challenging. He talked to me about language and obsessions and your work. And so that really sort of pushed me a little further. And then Miss Thompson, I was like, is it too lofty an ambition for me to want to pursue writing professionally? And she told me, no, it's not too lofty to want to do that. So then that's when I applied to NYU for playwriting, even though my real dream was to be a soap opera writer. So I went to NYU, and then at NYU, undergrad, I had like a lot of great teachers who encouraged me as I was nascent playwriting abilities. And then one of those teachers is a guy named Martin Epstein, who also taught in the grad musical theater writing program, who encouraged me to go check out the grad program. So then I applied to the grad program, and then I got into the grad program, and then there, like, it was like a really life-changing experience, because every teacher there really, like, they weren't trying to make us be something that we weren't. They just were trying to teach us the craft and to help us develop our voices. And one of those teachers was William Finn, who taught a master class. Bill Finn he passed away this past summer. Or spring, it's been a while. He taught a master class where you just sort of would bring in, like, you just sort of would write lyrics based on personal experiences or prompts that he gave us. He was really into personal writing, and that just was that was like my sweet spot. Was like I was inspired by a lot of singer-songwriters, and I wanted to sort of write personally. That was like my stuff I'd been doing in high school with Peter and with Deborah. And Bill saw that I did not know what I was doing as a lyricist, but he liked where I was writing from. And so he constantly was just saying, keep doing what you're doing, and you'll figure it out. You'll figure out the form, but keep writing from that honest place. And he was remained a champion of mine through, we had some ups and downs, don't get me wrong. But like, he was a big champion of mine through grad school and beyond. And I was shattered when he passed away, because he was such an icon and such a singular voice, and he pushed me to try to be a singular voice, and so I owe so much of that to him.
And actually, just as a quick follow-up, I want to preface this by saying I am deeply envious because I understand you saw a production of Raisin when you were a teenager. It's on my bucket list. I've never seen a production of it. Could you just say a little bit about some of the shows that have influenced you?
So when I was in middle school and high school, my mom and I used to go on little dates to see musicals when they would come to Detroit. And one weekend, she let me skip school on a Friday so that we could get on the train, and we went to Toronto when I was 13, and my grandmother and I went to go see Showboat and Phantom of the Opera, which were playing at the Ford Auditorium and the Pantages Theater. And at that time, it was a national tour. I was confused about this because I know there was a production of Showboat that was in Toronto and then went to Broadway and then went back, but I don't know if I saw it. I don't know at which leg of that I saw it. It was the '94 Hal Prince revival.
Remember who the Parthy was?
So on the tour, it was Cloris Leachman as Parthy.
That was the one I saw in Washington.
So that must have been the tour and not
tour.
after it already hit on Broadway. Okay.
Elaine Stritch did that originally.
So, that's right, because Elaine Stritch did it on Broadway. So then, we saw that like on a Friday and Phantom on a Saturday. And Showboat, my grandmother and I were just like knocked out by it. Like I just had never seen something that massive and had that kind of scope, and the singing was just out of this world to me. I just had never ever, I didn't know a musical could be that grand. And then Phantom, I was like, I do not understand this musical, but I liked the sound of it. But the story, I was like, who are these? What are they talking about? But I made my mom, in both cases, buy me the cast albums on tape. And I wore them out, especially Showboat. Like I still had the tape, and you can't see either side of it, like the text on either side, because I just play it over and over and over and over again. I would sing along with it while I was like doing my chores or whatever. And we also went and saw a tour of the show Raisin, which is a musical adaptation of Raisin in the Sun that won the Tony for Best Musical in 1974. And I just had never seen a musical that had a Black story that had that much complexity and depth. And I think I might have even encountered this musical before I read the play. But the music is so great, and the singing, like as Joe Morton was in this musical, you might know him from like Scandal and other things. He had like this incredible tenor voice, and the orchestrations were so hip, and I just, to this day, it's like in my top 5 of shows. It's just so expertly written musically that I wish that there could be some sort of revival of it. I'm trying to get Jenny Gersten at Encores to do it, if they can pull it together, because I think people should know that score.
I agree. Thank you.
Something that really comes through for me when I watch your work and listen to your work is that you deconstruct these typical structures and tropes, while also still, I think, sometimes very much enjoying them. And I was just wondering if you could discuss more about how you balance critiquing but also appreciating these structures and characters in your shows.
Wait, can you ask that one more time?
Yeah. You know, my students are always like, what are you talking about? I guess what I'm saying is I really love your meta-theatrical approach to making theater. So really my first question was, have you always had that interest in how you tell stories by telling stories within stories?
I don't think I've always had that, but I do, but I think it's just, I don't know where that comes from, to be honest with you. it might just be because that form is how there's like a kind of inherent satire within that form, and I think that there's something in me that wants to sort of skewer and satire everything, and so the story within the story allows me to do that, and I think that's probably why I'm drawn to it again and again. Though with A Strange Loop, for example, it wasn't. That was such an organic development of what it was, because it started as a sort of personal thing that was about me, but then at a certain point it stopped being about me and being about me, like the concept of me, of I, the self. Yeah. And so I'd use my own experience as like a kind of mannequin for that, but it wasn't. And so then telling Usher as the writer writing about a writer writing about a writer writing about a writer was meant to formally be more of a kind of self-portraiture and excavation than like than an interest in meta-theatricality for its own sake. And in White Girl in Danger, it was a piece that's in some ways kind of born of A Strange Loop and in the same moment in some ways, because Strange Loop was also so much about identity, but it's like identity from within this, very specific Black gay man. And then White Girl in Danger is sort of looking outward at like identity as it's sort of deployed in a socio-political sense. And what does it mean for like for people to think of themselves as being diverse within a white structure? Like, if that's something that you're aspiring to be, or you think of that as somehow radical, or you think of that's inclusive or whatever, it's for me those issues inspire these questions of like, well, who are the includers? If that's being inclusive, then who is including you? And like, do you really have any power within that? And so I couldn't think of a better, more way to explore that sort of question than through a meta-theatricality, because I would like for the audience to sort of consider all the dimensions of such a structure,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for explaining that. Well, you've also mentioned, I guess, with A Strange Loop, that it is self-referential, not autobiographical. And I was just curious, as a writer, do you ever feel guilty referencing your life? I feel like this is a question that a lot of like undergraduate playwriting students ask all the time, and what you do in those cases, or if that even comes up for you while you're writing.
Well, I don't feel guilty because it's not me. Like, Michael's not up there, Usher's up there. So it's a character. And, maybe there are folks who feel implicated or attacked when they see something like that. But it's truly not. So many people have come up to me over the years, and I always have to correct them and go, oh, I love the part when you're a mother, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, not my mother. Usher's mother. And even my mother does that. And I'm like, Mom, I understand why you think that's me doing you, but it's not, it's more complex than that. It's about a perception. Usher is a character who perceives things in a certain way until his perspective changes. And so everything that's up there is a distortion and an illusion. That's what A Strange Loop literally is. It's an illusion. A hand drawing a hand, drawing a hand, drawing a hand. It's an illusion. It's circling back in on itself. And your perspective, how your eye perceives it is what it is until it shifts. So I don't feel any guilt because it's about all of us, It's not me or you or any one person.
That makes sense. I think my mom would have the same question.
Well, actually, building on that, so as I mentioned in my remarks, your musicals are so immediately accessible because of the pop music, musical theater, but they're also for academics, catnip. So I'm just wondering where your experiences with critical race theories and gender and sexuality studies come from. Is that something that you did pursue in addition to musical theater writing?
I have no experience with critical race theory or gender studies, unfortunately, other than what I maybe have intuited, just sort of living life in a culture that talks about those issues. So I wish I could say that I was like deeply studied. I had read No Hortense Spillers or Sadia Hartman. I hear these names all the time, and I don't know who they are.
You just embody it.
I guess.
Yeah.
So you tell me.
But I guess related to that, you wrote a really wonderful piece in the Times, I think, well, last year when Wicked had opened the movie. And you were very clear about the distinctions between timeliness and timelessness.
Right.
And I wonder if you could just say a little bit about how those piss you off or how you think about those terms.
So I literally just was I just came from therapy before this, and I've been on a tear with my therapist for the last month or so about these issues. I just basically, something that I noticed and that I would offer to this room and anybody watching is to, for example, to take a look at any review that you read that's particularly a favorable review of something that's about theater or movies or art. And what you will begin to notice is that every single person talks about how timely whatever it is that they are seeing is, and how of the moment it is, and how it's so perfect for this moment and this moment, this moment, this moment. And it's so funny because you can read these pieces over like the last 5 years. So every single thing that those people said was timely. It was timely in 2021. It's timely in 2022. It's timely in 2023. It's timely in 2024. It's timely in 2025. But these things might all contradict each other. But what they love about them is how much it affirms whatever they think the vibe is at any given moment. And these vibes, what I learned, do not last. And they always change. So if the vibe is always changing, how timely is it? It's not. And so it bothers me it bothers me, but also because what I noticed is that what appears to me is that all of this is just marketing jargon. It's not really about anything material at all. So as I brought up to my therapist, speaking of Wicked this morning, because I wrote an op-ed about how I was tired of people talking about how Wicked was like an anti-fascist, anti-racist movie. And I'm like, well, how anti-fascist can it be when Cynthia Erivo is like doing the Elf of the Battle Cry in a Target? Like as on a commercial. Like what's anti-fascist about that? Literally nothing. Like everything about that is upholding empire. So there's but that's by design. It's meant to just sell the movie. And that's okay, sell the movie, but don't try to sell me anti-fascism or anti-racism along with my Target merchandise. And that's what makes me upset.
Yeah, well, that actually kind of answers my next question, but I was just going to say that I think you do a great job of pointing out systemic injustices in your work, while also at times making fun of or pointing to sometimes the hypocrisy of positive representation, liberal kind of ideology in politics. So I'm just curious, what does strong representation mean to you, or even maybe what does a strong character mean to you?
So many years ago, and this was actually was a big precursor to Wake on Danger, was in around 2015, there was this guy named Brett Ryback who was a musical theater writer and actor who I had met at a residency in Goodspeed, and he had written a blog on his website that I actually found out it's still there from years ago, that was at the sort of opining on diversity in musical theater, or lack thereof at that time, because at that time the musical Dear Evan Hansen was running in Atlanta. DC or Atlanta, I can't remember which one. And at the time, Dear Evan Hansen was an all-white cast. And the sort of marketing that was going around on social media was like this image of the cast, and it's all-white cast, and he sort of was really taking them to task for why in 2015 are we having these all-white casts or whatever. This is going around, and people were talking about all of that. And then he mentioned me in this blog as like a Black musical theater writer who you should consider, who he had just met, and blah, blah, blah. And he linked to my website. And then I woke up that morning, and a friend of mine had texted me, and he was like, hey, you just got mentioned in this viral blog post. And I read it, and I looked at it, and I was like, oh shit, he's pointing to my website that I haven't updated in 2 years. I need to get something up there. So I was like, what do I think about diversity in musical theater? I hadn't really been, I certainly had an opinion about it, but it wasn't something I was deeply thinking about at the time, because I'm just trying to make my rent every month and do my stuff, So I was like, why don't I just write a few words about diversity in musical theater, what I thought. And then the more I wrote about it, I was like, well, I actually have a lot to say about this. So I wrote this blog that I put on my website. I posted online. It was one of the first things I'd written that went viral, which at that time was, all you wanted was to go viral. And part of what I said in it that I stand, and there's some things about that post that I wrote that I don't necessarily endorse anymore, but one of the things in it that I do sort of endorse is just tell the truth. And that to me is what I'm interested in terms of characters and representation. Because the truth is, to me, is this idea about good representation, bad representation, more representation is, again, it's more sort of marketing jargon, and it's also in its own darkly ironic way, it turns Black people and people of color or people who are non-white or whatever into these objects that can be moved around like chattel within a certain neoliberal mindset and marketplace. And I'm not interested in being moved around as an object in that way. I'd like to sort of insert my own interiority and my own individuality and my own complexity and my own sort of nuance and uncertainty and all those things. And so for me, a strong character is a character who wants something and pursues it and either wins, fails, or abandons, that is a character that you really want to watch them sort of carry their weight across the stage or whatever, the canvas or in music or whatever. A character is an individual who has a relationship to the world that you see the tension explored. That's the representation I'm interested in. It's not about my color, or it's not only about my color or my sex or my gender, class, or any of those markers. It's about the sort of internal battle between the self and the collective, the battle or the collaboration or that one forms between the collective,
Great. You say one more each?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, I guess related to that question, Strange Loop off-Broadway opened really on the brink of the pandemic, and then most of your work that followed was after the pandemic. I wonder if you could just say what you think about the current state of queer theater and musical theater. Another topic for a therapist?
I think it's really bad. I mean, and I'm saying that lovingly. Like, it's not because I'm not trying to be a hater, though some people will say I'm a hater or contrarian or whatever. But I do really believe that the wrong lessons have been taken from A Strange Loop to the degree that one uses that as a reference point. But more broadly than a Strange Loop, which is a part of a wider swath of, art that's out there, I just think this is part of why I said when I accepted the award, I've been feeling a little bit like a cog in something turning, because it feels increasingly to me like a lot of quote unquote queer theater is just about being there. It's not really about its formal material or like it's why are any of these things important other than just to represent? And I don't find that to be particularly helpful for the future of queer theater or whatever you call it. And also, like, there's just an incredible amount of it's also there's a homogeneity to so much of it that it's to me, which seems kind of fitting given the growing the encroaching power of AI. Like, and another thing I talk to my therapist about is I have this theory that there's two kinds of artificial intelligence. There's digital artificial intelligence, but there's human artificial intelligence. And I think that digital artificial intelligence was born of human artificial intelligence, which has been with us for quite some time. It's just that the chat, OpenAI, has figured out how to capitalize on something that already was happening, was that people are not critically thinking. They're really into being sort of like being the same and not sort of like asserting any sort of dissenting view. Or think about how rare it is these days that you hear that something is bad. Everyone just wants to say everything is great. Like this movie that's out right now, One Battle After Another, is terrible. One Battle After Another is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And yet everywhere I turn, I'm told that what an epic genius movie this is, and oh my God, Paul Thomas Anderson, and I'm just like, Lord have mercy. And I really have been sitting with this because I remember seeing Magnolia when I was a freshman in college. And I was very impressionable, and I'd never gone back to watch Magnolia again, but I remembered my first instinct when I saw Magnolia as a 19-year-old was, this movie is stupid. But then at that time, everybody kept saying, this movie is so brilliant, so I went back to watch it, and I was like, oh yeah, it is brilliant, because everybody said it was. And maybe it is brilliant, because again, as an adult, I've never gone back to watch it, but I've just been thinking about that, about how like we live, especially as so much is online, that like it's so easy for things to just fall into these homogenous, tribal, good, bad matrices, and there's no nuanced critical thinking about what is it. And then because there's this algorithmic sort of incentive to around so much that's out there to criticize something, you then have to kill those people who criticize because they're going to kill your vibe, or they might reduce the number of subscribers that you have, that you built from a world where everybody just has to like everything that's out there and not think critically about it. So I feel that a lot of that has invaded this idea of what we think of in terms of queer theater, and so I feel darkly about it.
All right, thank you. Chris?
Well, on that note, the theme of our student conference is Emerging Emergent in Theater Performance and Scholarship, and it's a two-part question. The first part is kind of corny, but do you feel like you have emerged? And also, Who are some of your favorite emerging artists now? And I guess we don't even have to constrain it to theater, but just artists in general that you are really being inspired by or interested in.
I mean, sort of the emerging artists thing, like that. It's so become so relative at this point because the institutions are all so challenged by the support they can give out there. So, and it's also so many people that I find the lines between emerging and not emerging to be almost virtually non-existent. But yeah, but I guess you could say I'm emerged. And sorry, the second part of your question?
Oh, just who are some of your favorite, even if they're not emerging artists, but who are some of your favorite theater artists or artists in general? Yeah.
Cola Scola, like figured out. They figured it out. They figured out exactly how to bring the sort of the artistic excellence and the sort of commercial success together without compromising, and that is no small feat. Like that is like the whole ball game, and I've been such a huge fan of Cole for years and years and years, and also people like Aaron Markey. Aaron Markey is a genius. Aaron Markey is a genius. Aaron Markey is a genius. And then there's people like, if you want to talk emerging artists, I guess. I mean, I just saw this musical a weekend or two ago called Slam Frank. Slam Frank is bananas. It's like truly, like I was just thank God for Slam Frank. Like that those artists, Andrew Fox, I can't remember the book writer's name, but like thank God that they are going for it. And they're not apologizing for going for it. They're just saying it the way they want to say it, and they're saying what they want to say. And they have a group of actors who are really committed to realizing that vision and sort of doing this dark, black, satirical, biting, sort of gives no fucks, offensive, all the things. Like, it's so brave to do something like that. And because so many people are gonna be like, in a time like this, really? In the moment, that's not timely. There's not, it's so upsetting. And they're just like, they're slaughtering the sacred cows, they're stepping over the line, and it's truly remarkable. And I wish that they had a bigger venue or audience. I hope that they get a bigger audience because what they're doing is so needed. And so those are emerging artists, I would say, that I admire.
Should we open up
Sure. I can take the mic. Okay. You want to moderate?
Oh, great. So we're going to open the room up to questions. If anyone would like to ask, maybe we'll start over here and then work our way over.
Thank you so much for this. I've snuck in from NYU Performance Studies, and I wanted to ask you a question, and I promise I'm not making you do my homework for me, but I can't not ask this question to you. I'm in a class right now called Showgirls, taught by Hilton Alls. We're studying the figure of the diva.
Hilton.
What?
I love Hilton. He's a friend. Yeah.
He loves you too, according to the incredible piece in the New Yorker that I'm sure we've all read. And our next assignment is to investigate how the showgirl shows her culture, race, ethnicity, and the showgirl is expansive. And specifically thinking about how white writers, audiences look at the Black diva and what a white writer might see. And also about how the Black writer writes about the diva, and in this case, the white girl. I'm really curious what your thoughts are on this, how you think. Oh, go ahead.
Well, can I just ask a follow-up question to that? Do you mean do I have thoughts on how the white writers write about Black divas and how black writer or the white? Is that what you're asking?
It's really 2 questions in one.
Okay.
And feel free to answer either, whatever's coming to mind.
I don't have like an overarching thesis about this or general thesis about this, but I will say that I'm working on a new piece, or they're very, very slowly been working on it. It was one thing and has slowly evolved into this other thing, and part of my working on it is it's sort of one of the themes of that are about artificial intelligence, human artificial intelligence, which I'm more interested in than digital artificial intelligence. And part of that, my into that has to do with music, like a lot of pop music that I've been studying. And as I study pop music, it's forced me to zero in on sort of the biggest acts in pop music, and that of course lands me at Taylor Swift and at Beyonce. And to me, so both of those, I guess, I don't know if people consider Taylor Swift a diva or not, but she's certainly a huge pop sensation in the same way, but also Beyonce's a huge pop sensation, but they're obviously 2 different entities and they're treated in different ways, but for my money, one is Coke and one is Pepsi. And so I look at them in that way. And so writing about those 2, if I were, and I've made reference to Beyonce in several things that I've written, and I'm gonna make reference to Taylor in the next thing that I've been writing, because I've been studying her a little bit more closely recently. And I guess I think, so when I think about those showgirls, I'm thinking more about the artificial intelligence that gives birth to them and that they give birth to. I don't know if that really answers your question, but that is what I think about when I think about showgirls.
Oh, we have a question over here, yeah.
Thanks. You were talking earlier a little bit about your teachers and how one of them asked you to look at your obsessions. And I noticed a lot of your work seems to investigate the mind in some sort of way. There seems to be sort of looking at the me, looking at the me in the world, or looking at the mind in the world. And I'm just curious if that is part of your obsession and how those 2 things might go together, obsession and looking at the mind for you.
I don't know that I've ever thought that my obsessions are the mind, but I will say a theme that I can find, even because I had like all the journals I've ever kept since I was a teenager, and every once in a while I'll like go back and look at like what I was writing when I was like 16. And what I've noticed that is something that goes back from there that is a connected tissue to now is like I've always been like, I think too much. Oh my God, why can't I stop overthinking? I think. Like, this is why I can't have anything, because I think too much, you know? And so I think that probably means it's one of my unofficial obsessions. It's not something that was ever conscious, is that I've always been like trying to pull back the layers of the onion, like trying to understand the core of what bothers me. And so I guess in that regard, it is one of my obsessions.
Other questions? Over here.
Hi. So I, for anyone who knows me, this will be unsurprising, have a question about religion and performance. I study nuns.
Okay.
So obviously in A Strange Loop and then in Teeth, I know the story kind of came to you already, like you had the story that you had to work with. There's this great exploration of the performativity of religion and religious experience and where performance and religion intersect in the world around us. And I think obviously Teeth, it was very, very interesting to talk about really what is true religious conviction, like who had true religious conviction, who was following their true religious conviction, and who was like performing their religious conviction for social gain. On the topic of like, tell the truth, right? Where do you think commentary on religion is living right now in theater writ large, performance, the online echo chamber, everything has to be good? Where is that living, and where should it live?
So I've been thinking a lot about, and I've always thought a lot about religion, obviously, but I've been thinking a lot about it recently because I feel like we're living in a strange time where if you look at sort of the last decade or so, religion sort of in the country has sort of dwindled in a lot of ways, like organized religion. It's certainly not what I came up in, where it felt like the religious right or Christianity and pastors were sort of like omnipresent and everywhere and had like a real stranglehold. But that was kind of replaced, I think, by a lot of online religion, some of it, I mean unofficially so. Like it had all the markers, like these sort of martyrs on social media, sort of messianic talking points about politics. Politics is religion. Social movement is religion. All these things I've noticed, like, and also just online, like sort of phone, social media, become these strange little Bibles that we sort of carry around with, again, this, I know I keep repeating myself, artificial intelligence, and vibes that are just like accepted, that we don't think critically about. And so I'm also looking at, wait, who keeps calling me? Oh, my agent, okay. All of these sort of, I feel like it started to be replaced by like online stuff, but now sort of I feel like there's this strange thing where the religious right is trying to claw back its control through sort of the current administration, but at the same time, people can't let go of the online stuff. So you have this weird competition for God or whatever. Meanwhile, I'm working on a horror movie idea that is set in a church because I've been noticing over the years, and this is all related, I promise, but I've been noticing over the years that there's always these movies these religious horror movies that are about devils and gods and devils and Satan and demons, and we have to vanquish the demon and the blah, 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 blah. But there's no horror movies that are about like the savior and like who comes back to punish you for your sins. And so I'm working on like a horror movie about a savior who comes back to punish like the sinners. Because that to me feels more like the truth of like what the moment is than of a demon coming to get us. Even though I think many people would be like, oh, all these devils and whatever. Whereas I'm like, no, it's actually the saviors and self-proclaimed saviors who are scarier to me. And so there is this performance of righteousness that I find terrifying. And so how should it be? I don't know what that's for me to say. It's difficult for me to be prescriptive, but I do think that we should be truthful about what we see around us, because there are demons everywhere, but there's also righteous saviors who are just as scary.
Hi, Hi, thank you so much for being here. This question is going to tie us back to New York City and the connections between the grad center and the theater landscape at large. So many people we are in a really critical moment in terms of space and in terms of where and how we get produced. But I don't want to focus on that, the critical in terms of the impossibilities, because there are a lot of impossibilities economically. In an ideal New York, what would your process look like with support? What would the theater space look like? What would the audience look like? And which borough would you be interested in having all of this in?
Oh my God, I literally was just talking to my therapist about that as well this morning. What would ideal space? Process?
Space, process, theater, architecture, like space for your personal life, what the process is, what the architecture of the theater is, what borough, and what kind of community that you want to pull in.
So I don't know. I don't really know what space per se. I guess it would just be a space where you could spread out a bit, obviously, that was flexible space, I think, that had great acoustics for music, for sure. I'm not that particular to borough, except I live in Manhattan, so maybe it would be easier to do it in Manhattan, but there's certainly great theater that happens in the other boroughs. Process-wise, though, what would be really nice is if you could sort of build something that you wanted to do with the producer, and that there was like always sort of production support at every step of the developmental process to get you what you needed in order to build the thing, whether that's, a certain number of readings or workshops, and maybe one that you have an audience and one that you don't. Adequate time to spend if you're working on a musical with musicians and music directors and arrangers and all that stuff. And just like an ability to like something that we, for example, on White Girl in Danger, looking back on that I wish that had been able to happen, is it would have been nice if we could have had like a kind of open lab process where an audience came in and then we learned something from the audience and then we like went away and then we did work on it and then we went back into production. Like, I wish that you could always do that, because what's happened is now, because everything's so expensive and time is at such a premium, you basically, when you put something up, it has to be perfect. And that's just not fair to any of the artists involved. And I would prefer a process where there was more room to figure it out without sort of the pressure of it having to be perfect. So that would be my preference.
Maybe we'll take a couple more. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with us today, and thank you so much for sharing about your process, the long process that sounds like it was fraught with a lot of trials and tribulations. My question is, I love A Strange Loop is one of my favourite musicals, and watching it, I was struck by just how much of the beauty and nuance was able to be communicated in dialogue with the visuals, with the lighting designers. And I was just wondering, in this long process of making the work, did you have a collaborator that was particularly inspiring to you to really see that vision that you maybe had so long ago actually crystallize? Like this aha theatrical moment where you're like, this collaborator has really brought this out for me.
Yeah, so that would be my director, Stephen Brackett. Stephen really at an early stage of the piece saw something in it, and he saw, like, when he's the one it was his idea that we cast it with all black men, and that's how we initially talked about it, and that sort of opened up for me like what it could be, and I began writing toward that concept, which then changed the shape of it in a lot of ways. And then later on, Raja Feather Kelly as our choreographer really breathed a kind of breath of life into it, and the movement of how to take that cast and conceit and make it move in a way that really opened it up. And then obviously, our set designer, Arnolfo Maldonado, our lighting designer, Jen Shriver, but it was Stephen who sort of, who sort of helped build the capacity for everybody else to come in and do their best work. So I always give Stephen Brackett like all the flowers in the world. I feel he's like so criminally undersung, and so I like to sing his praises whenever I can.
Should we take one more? Is that
Sure.
Yeah, no, over here.
Thank you. I wanted to just kind of piggyback off of this person's question for a bit, and especially because you're from Detroit. My wife comes from Northeast Ohio, and I've been spending a fair amount of time out there recently. And, you know, as you probably know, there's a heck of a lot of wonderful talent coming out of all of these areas, and a really interesting, you know, dynamic between the regional theaters and New York. But it seems like ultimately all the, you know, quote, top people end up here. And sometimes it feels like some of their stories get left behind in those other places. Do you think there's a better way of, do you think it's necessary, and do you think there's a better way of kind of spreading the love a little bit around the theater community to, you know, to bring in those other areas?
I don't have an answer to that. I mean, a direct answer to that, but I will say what I wish were the case is that the sort of, let's say just in theater, that there was more of that it felt more national, and that sort of, I don't know what that, I think that means you have to weave in like arts education into that, and that these networks would have to always feel like one tributary flowed into the next. And sure, New York is sort of like the major theatrical hub of the country, but if that's the major hub, I wish it felt more like, and there are relationships between like regional theaters in New York and stuff, but so much of it is about getting to New York as opposed to what's happening in those places. And so I wish that there was more, it would require more funding and also more of a kind of philosophical defining of like why, and social defining of like why theater is important, and why the craft of it is important, and each part of putting theater together, whether it's an actor, writer, lighting designer, crew, whomever, all these jobs are part of a tradition and a craftsmanship that is part of the ecosystem, and that everybody's trying to teach, you know, communities but also people who want to do it for a living why it's important, and that then led to, you know, continued investment in theaters in small towns, big cities, whatever, throughout the nation, and that it was an ecosystem that was constantly feeding each other, and that there was felt it was like that it wasn't just like a privilege. It was like a need. Like it was something that was that like we nationally prized and took care of.
Yeah, I feel so deeply with that too. I feel like the cultivation of this, of why art is important, and starting that so young, and you know, you were talking about teachers early being so formative, and I would imagine there are many people in this room who had formative teachers that brought us to theater and to the arts and instilled that passion. But it's unfortunately, I think, more unique than it is ubiquitous. Would everyone please join me in giving one more round of applause to Michael R. Jackson? Sure. Well, so, and also thank you so much, Jim, for being here and for supporting the conference and for your opening remarks. So what's going to happen? Can I get a time check, actually? Perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do, everyone, is we're going to take a short break. We will start our third and final panel of the conference do we have all of our panelists here? I know Tuesday is here. Fantastic. Poon is over there. Great. We might actually start, if people could be back at like 3:50 p.m., and we might start a few minutes earlier. Does that sound okay? Great, so like, let's get a coffee. There's snacks upstairs in the green room, and please be back here at 3:50 for, what's that?